Hey everyone, it's Greg, the host here at the Opportunity Podcast. And today I am speaking with Frankie Fihn, the author of Beyond the Agency Box. And also, he runs a pretty cool group, forgetting the name of it right now, but it's like Agency Lifestyle Design on Facebook. So I've known of Frankie for a while. I read his book a while ago. Really like the way the guy thinks. He kind of takes an agency like that traditionally your hair is like falling out and you're super stressed as you're building out an agency, and he basically asks, well, why do you have to build it that way when you can just do it this way? And one of the things I really like about him is he takes not easy to do processes but simple to do processes and figures out a way to automate a lot of what drives agency owners crazy, such as doing sales calls with unqualified people. We break down the entire process of what he does in this interview, plus just a bunch of other stuff. There's a lot of good like life lessons in this podcast. Frankie's been around the block several times, so it's my honor to introduce you to good old Frankie Fihn here. And I'll stop talking now, so I shall see you on the other side. All right, I got Frankie Fihn with me here. I'm a big fan of yours, man. I actually read your book months and months ago. I'm forgetting the name, but we'll plug it towards the end of the show if you like. Joined your group, and you and I have had a few chats now. But for my audience that may not be familiar with the man, the myth, and the legend, why don't you give us a brief background on who you are?
Well, I'm known as in our world as the digital marketing agency sell without meetings and phone calls, which it's a very like service labor intensive kind of business where I don't know, we just have a lot of people making demands on your time as you would with any services. And after, 20 years of doing this, I've figured out how to do it where our acquisition is done without talking to people, our managing the clients we have is done without that. And then also like our hiring process, the people we bring in is all phoneless and meetingless. And so when people first hear that, it almost sounds like an impossibility, especially if you've been in any sort of service oriented world. But, I say it's easy or it's simple, but not easy. Like there's not a lot of complexity to it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. But that's who I'm known as, I guess, for the people who don't know me.
Yeah, I discovered you in a roundabout way. I think you're friends with Jeff Miller, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm having him come on the podcast here. I finally convinced him, but I found you through something that I think you and him did. And like, wow, both of these guys are awesome because like it's clear that you both have like been raised on the internet marketer world, right? But you there's like a certain like, man, you don't got to do it this way. You don't need these like insane risk reversal guarantees like I will cure your mom's cancer if I don't give you like 15 leads this month, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I was really impressed with the infrastructure you had set up. So let's get right into it, man. Because I think so to give you some context, like a lot of my audience, they have agencies. A lot of them are SEO agencies, which I think that was like one of your first ones you did. And this is not the experience that they're having. They're on phone calls all the time. So let's help heal this wound of theirs of having to get on the phone all the time. My first question for you, man, when you went about this lifestyle agency, like after all those students you've seen and you trained, what are like the common pain points or time sucks that these agency owners are struggling with? What is the most common stuff?
Yeah, there's a couple of deeper level things that can like really make your life miserable. And I'll tell you one of the things that I was most guilty of that I see, and that's just like literally just being too wide. And it comes from the basis of essentially believing anybody with a credit card is a good fit, right? Like that's what I believe in those early days. It's like if they showed up and they had a credit card, like we should do business. And what ended up happening when I did that is it introduces all sorts of like complexity in a business where firstly is like I always say there's a hidden metric in it called energy. Is I would get somebody who like I'd say 60-70% of my people ask me for SEO. You mentioned I did it mostly for plastic surgeons, but if somebody had a credit card and a problem that I thought I could solve, if they said, hey, can you build me a website, or can you do pay-per-click, or I got a bankruptcy firm, can you do a bankruptcy? And I said yes to everybody. And I didn't really think about it, but I compare it to like a restaurant where if you run a restaurant and you make different food every day, like say somebody comes in and says, do you guys make Chinese food? Like then you got to like figure out where to buy the wok and where to source the Asian ingredients. And then the next day, like let's say you're making pizza, then you got to figure out where to get the specialty flour and, get the right pizza oven and all those kind of things. And what happens is it dilutes both your messaging and it dilutes your ability to deliver it at scale because you're just doing too much. And there's a fundamental shift that I realized that ultimately I wanted to switch from renting a service to renting my tools and systems. And so it's like you don't go to McDonald's because they have the world's greatest burger chef. It's like they got a system for making Big Macs at scale. And if you're hungry enough for it, if you eat, I don't personally eat that kind of crazy stuff, but if you are like if you want it, like it's pretty much guaranteed to be consistent. And so I'd say, like, it's amazing to me how many of the problems are literally just structure problems. They show up in all kinds of ways where people say, I got this crazy client, or my cash flow sucks, or, I can't sell my thing, or, all kinds of, different ways it shows up down the line. But they're almost just functions of like just doing too much stuff for too many people.
And that resonates because like you and I were having a little conversation just offline on Facebook, and like I told you how Lauren keeps my mind together because she's like helping me with all the different things I'm doing at any given time at the moment. So
Yeah.
when I see my agency friends, yeah, I could see them being just like pulled apart constantly. It was just so many different tasks. But one of the things I wanted to zero in on what you just said there, you mentioned like from what I'm gathering, you tell me if this is wrong. It sounds like what you're saying is like agency owners really need to niche down in who they serve, but also in what they do in serving that person. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm not saying this is the only issue in the industry because I see like people at all kinds of different levels, and I wrote about it in kind of the book. Like I talk with people who are beginning, starting out. I talk with people who got a small team. I talk with people who are just like full time managers. I talk with people who got 800 clients, and I talk to people who are franchising their business model. So I kind of see it at all the different levels. But I'll tell you, that is probably the most common thing. Is really because most people don't really have a clear picture of who they want to do it for, like who really is the best fit. Just because we can do it for everybody doesn't mean we should. And also what
Hmm.
they deliver around that. And I'll tell you why I think that is. Because we live in the internet marketing world where there's some new cool hypey gonna change the world kind of thing every 5 minutes. And it's like it's pretty much impossible not to get sucked into the latest, greatest shiny object at some point. And you don't necessarily see this in other businesses. Like a plumber opens up and he's still like being a plumber like 20 years later, right? Like he's not like, hey, I'm a coach today, I'm a consultant tomorrow, I'm gonna just rent, sell courses. Now I got a tool. You know what? I'm gonna do e-commerce. Screw that. Now I'm gonna be a options trader. You see this in our space like kind of badly. And what kills people is they don't just stick with one thing for a year. And I'll tell you, there was a period in my early dark days where I was just trying to make magic internet monies, and I tried all these things. I read all these ebooks, and I was just throwing all kinds of spaghetti against the wall. And I tried some really random stuff. I did a thing called e-whoring, where you pretend to be like a pretty girl next door, and you go on a discussion forum where there's usually like a lot of male attention, like a sports forum or finance, and all the guys flock to you without even trying. And then you say stuff like, well, I'd like to continue this conversation, but go to my dating affiliate link and you get paid $2-3 for every sign up. And I was constantly hopping from thing to thing. And I remember a friend of mine who was the most successful like internet entrepreneur I knew at that point in my life, and was like, he was basically like a god in my eyes. Everything he said was like gospel because he was the only one I knew like really living this life. And he said to me, if you just picked any one of those things and stuck with it, you'd be farther along than you are now. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was like, what was actually killing me is that I never actually built any momentum in one direction. So I say that because I think that's a killer for a lot of people, is just there's so many shiny objects in our space. It becomes really, really hard to be disciplined. And it doesn't even matter what the one thing is. That's what people get confused about, to think like, oh, I'm going to try and find the e-commerce, the super secret thing or whatever. Almost all of them have like pros and cons, but if you stick with them long enough, they usually like tend to work out.
Yeah, I get asked a similar question. This is like, what's the best business model to buy? And my answer is the best business model is the one that combines all of them, but you can't do all of them at once because there's all of them have pros and cons, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Eoring thing is quite funny though. I was just on a Black Hat World forum, and I like
Yeah.
going in there like slumming, like it's like memory lane because I was like you. I also did a bunch of different stuff, and in the Make Money Online place, there was all these SEO affiliates talking about like, what are we going to do now? And this one guy's like, I'm starting an AI only. Like, oh, good for you. So it's live and well, that business model as well. So, but yeah, I think marketers in general, man, we tend to be all over the place, like with our creativity. Like during the whole crypto phase, all my SEO friends are suddenly like my NFT friends. Then that crashed. Now they're my SEO friends, and now they're back to being my Bitcoin friends. So it's the grand cycle of the marketer's life cycle, it seems.
Ain't that the
But
truth?
in Yeah. In terms of agencies though, talk to me about what are the like the key areas and tasks that you have discovered that you can automate, you can scrap or alter altogether versus like what other people are doing. Because this is like your speciality, it feels.
Yeah, and a lot of it is really just finding like repeatable stuff. So I have like a friend who has a $50 million a year video editing agency in the legal space, and they put on a big annual conference in Atlanta, and it's a big deal. Like they get a lot of A-listers. Gary V's been there, the Governor Arnold's been there. Like, come on, come to
Oh
my
wow.
seminar. I'm going to change your life. Come on, right? So he's had some really cool people, and I remember he said to me, if you get into it, and this is true of any business, including yours, by the way, or anybody else listening to this, is that at some point, great marketing actually becomes great operations. He said it's one thing to have like an idea, I want to make a podcast, as you obviously experience. It's another thing to actually like schedule time, actually record it, actually publish guests, actually distribute it, actually put it out into the world, do it week after week, and keep doing it, months and months long after it felt like it wasn't working to you. And most
Yeah.
people never get to that point. And so I think kind of like at some level, like what you realize is scrapping it down to the things that work and just doing them again and again, and then building systems and processes so that those things become repeatable. Like I'm not a big fan of franchises in general, but what makes franchises so sexy for people is that there's a repeatability. Like if you go to Starbucks anywhere or you go to McDonald's anywhere, like you can expect some level of consistency. And so I think within our own businesses, like taking a page from the franchise book of like really deducing the 80-20 of this is what really matters. Now how do we build systems and processes like for you, so like just even booking this process with you, I can see your process because you have Lauren help you with the scheduling. She helps organize the content and the topics, and if you didn't have those things in place, like me, I have my own teams. Like I probably wouldn't be able to do it all the time, because if I had to figure out like actually scheduling it and publishing it on the Instagrams, like I would just forget, right? And so I think the solution to all of us, like kind of what you described of like just being creative types that are pulled a million different directions, and I consider myself, and probably you do as well, just somebody who likes creating cool stuff, is as fast as humanly possible get like a system and process and somebody responsible for maintaining consistency, because chances are like you got 2-3 times in you before you get some shiny object and you can't keep doing that thing very much
Yeah.
longer, right? And so supporting yourself with that piece will allow you to kind of like, at least for me, kind of veer off tangent, but also like build a consistency to your machine that wouldn't be possible if you weren't doing that. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's kind of how I look at it.
No, absolutely. It reminds me a bit when I first became like the manager over at EF, and like I thought I wanted more creative whirlwind people like me, and I didn't learn that lesson. That was a terrible mistake on my part until much later. But yeah, now I want to hire operational people that could kind of tame the shiny object whirlwind that's always going through my head of like different things we could do, right? Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great idea. We'll put that in the for later bucket, but we got to do this still first. Like, oh right, right. So I'm right with you on that. In terms of like how you are automating away your sales calls, I want to get stuck in a little bit on that before we move into some more of the operational stuff. But like, I'm assuming you are doing an acquisition system like ads to get clients, and they're going to a sales letter or like a VSL of some sort. Walk me a bit through that process, like how you've eliminated the sales call in your agency.
So take you a little bit through that. I don't know if anybody else has had this kind of experience, but I've done like not just a sales call here and there, but I've done like thousands over my life. Like, over 20 years of doing this, like, had periods. And I've also hired lots of salespeople over the years and managed sales team and even managed sales managers. And in that sort of journey, at some point, if you start having calls with the same types of people, what you'll find is you can almost like predict what they're going to say before they say it. So, like, for example, like I remember when I first started taking phone calls in the legal space, I'd get a lawyer and they'd say, I just need more clients. And I would say, well, what do you mean? And they would say, well, I have roller coaster income. And I would be kind of a little bit confused. And they would say, well, like I get all my business from referrals, but it's inconsistent. So, like, one month I get 75,000, next month I get 8. I don't know whether I should be scaling up or laying off staff because it's so like wildly inconsistent from month to month, and I feel like I have a business I have no control over it. Then you get on a second call and the next lawyer says the exact same thing as the last person, and then the next person says the exact same thing as the last person. Do that like just 11, 12 times in a row, and you start to realize that like you can say things, they go, hey, I need more clients, and you could go like, let me ask you, Greg, do you need more clients because you have roller coaster income because you're dependent on referrals and they're like just wildly inconsistent from month to month? So you don't know whether you should be scaling up or laying off staff or anything like that. And they're like, oh my God, yes. Like you just read my mind. And so we like to think we're all really different and we come with our own unique perspectives and angles. But what I found is sales calls have more in common than differences. And so what I realized is in doing video, it's not that we eliminated sales calls per se, is we just put the 80-20 of it into a video presentation. And so I realized like after doing these, like most people just really want to know really, really basic stuff. Is they kind of ask it all kinds of different ways, but they're like, what is this thing? Like, tell me about like, what this call is about, right? Like that's, what do you guys do? Like kind of thing. They ask it all kinds of different ways, but they're just essentially wondering like, what do you guys do? Now, if in that period of time between problems they have or outcomes they want, you show them something they want, then their mind will shift to, I wonder if that would work for me the same way as it worked for so-and-so, right? So their mind immediately like more personalizes. That sounds interesting. I want that, but would that work in me in my situation? And then what I found is they wander to like, I wonder how that thing works. And then they'll ask you, how much is it out of curiosity? And you'd be amazed at how many sales calls in all kinds of different industries are just people wanting to know, like, how much is this thing? And then if they get past that and they like the price, they'll go like, well, what do we got to do next to get started? And so when I started creating these videos, I'm known as a 5-minute Loom guy, but the truth was when I first created the very first one, Greg, I wasn't sure it was going to work. And I didn't want to pay for the full version of Loom, which is only like $10 a month or something like that. But I didn't want to pay for it because I didn't want to make a bunch of videos, then be stuck with the software for something that wasn't working. And so I had to condense the pitch literally down to 5 minutes because Loom is ruthless and cuts you off at like 5 minutes, 3 seconds over. You don't get to say the whole pitch. And so I really had to like focus. And what I found is after doing this and running it for a while is that people with money that like are generally busier and have success but don't have a lot of time prefer to be sold in a 5-minute video with all the details than they prefer to be like, hey, let's talk for 60, 90 minutes to see if we're maybe a fit. In fact, a lot of times if you just tell them how much it is, they'll buy it. So I learned a format for just answering that. So like when somebody wants to know what is this thing about, I found it's easiest to actually answer that in a picture, not with words. So the first thing we do is we just show them a picture of what it is that we do. Like you're going to get leads from Facebook that look like this. And then when they say like, will this work for me? We simply describe like 1, 2, or 3 things that the people who have success with our system have in common and say, we find it works really well if you got A, B, and C. Like if you got a team of people trained on the phone and they got scripts and you got a CRM, we found it works really well. If you haven't figured out that phone hurdle, it's probably not for you. And then how does it work? We really just show them like in 3 to 5 steps. I call it my 3 to 5 step plan and say like, here's an example of it, like with our motorcycle case stuff, like, hey, did you know we can target motorcycle people on Facebook? Well, we do that. We target motorcycle riders, motorcycle interested, and people who buy motorcycle helmets. And we run this within 50 miles of your business. And then what we do is we show them ads and say, hey, I hope you're never in a motorcycle accident, but just in case, make sure to grab this free book. And then we follow up with them for 2 years with messages that answer questions about how the legal process works and what to do if they're ever in an accident. And what we find is a percentage of those people will hire you as a motorcycle attorney. And that's like an example of a 3 to 5 step plan. And then the last piece is we just tell them how much it is. I know it's like everybody says you can't tell them how much it is, but I find especially with busy, successful people with money. And the most important thing is not the price. It's how you contrast the price. In the same way that like, if I say, hey, I got a car for sale, it's $5,000. That's not a deal and that's not a ripoff. Like you need more information about what kind of car you're getting. And so it's like if I say, hey, I got a 1972 used Hyundai with rusted doors and doesn't run, like don't buy that. But if I say, hey, like my wife just cheated on me, so I'm selling her brand new 911 Turbo because I bought it for her. It's a $250,000 car, but I'm selling it for $5,000 just because I want to spite her. And the first person who gets here gets that $5,000 car and say, it's real and legitimate. Like you better sprint over there and go get that $250,000 car for $5,000. So when we present price, we always contextualize it like what they're going to get with that. And then just tell them what the next steps are. And so this comes out of a function is like, we haven't eliminated sales calls per se as much as we're just doing them in fast forward in video and hitting all the same milestones you would hit in a conversation. And then as far as like how we drive people there, I've had people do it every make and model. I've had people send them to cold strangers. We got a guy who's using AI to put in backgrounds of their website and their analysis as he does one catch-all video. I've had people run them obviously in paid ads, but I'll tell you my personal way is I believe they work even better if you pre-sell people on basically like your methodology, what I would call your plan. And so the way we do this is we find the movers and shakers in different industries and co-create valuable stuff for their audience. And we do this by just giving away the plan for free, knowing that a percentage of people will want our help with the implementation side. And so we just like, like if you do SEO for plumbers, show plumbers how they can rank their website for free. Go to the industry association, create a little free training for them. Percentage of people will watch that, will reach out to you. And rather than talking to them all one-on-one, just say, okay, cool. I put all the details in a 5-minute video. Let me know if we should talk. And the real magic to me is that the video does the sifting and the sorting for you, is that you don't have to spend hours and hours talking to people to figure out who would buy it. And because of it, and then it's also easier to then keep that relationship in like video format, not, hey, we need calls and stuff, because that's how you got them in the first place. It's like, hey, I know you're too busy for calls, as am I. So that's why I'm going to update you with these little videos.
I love that. There's a lot to unpack there. That last bit you said is like content marketing 101, right? I always told my team we should give so much value that a person could go sell their business without using us. But we know they won't because they're like, wow, that was so much value, but that sounds like a shitload of work. Can you guys just do that for me? Right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. So that's our mentality with our content strategies. Like, how do we be so thorough? They're like, wow, can you just do it for me? In terms of your video, I love everything you had to say there. I think that makes a lot of sense. And like, especially like the fact that you shortened down to 5 minutes, because there's a lot of truth to what you said there. Like, I was just thinking about earlier today at a guy, he wanted me to get on a call with this like brand awareness opportunity, which is actually like a legit like cool opportunity. But I told him like, look, man, I'm too busy. Like, we might be able to do a call in like 3 weeks from now, or you can just send it to me over LinkedIn. Like, we can chat on here and it'll probably happen like a lot faster. Just tell me what you need, So I'm with you on all of that stuff. And I do feel like you eliminated the sales call here a bit, but in a marketing way. So I always joke that marketing is sales at scale without intimacy. And the intimacy in this is obviously, the call. I'm assuming like when they watch this video, do you have like, and you give the price, is there like a payment link where they can just like click on, or is that then you get on the conversation when they respond back like, hey, I'm interested in moving ahead? Like, how do you actually onboard them?
So there's a tiny little bit of variation in there that comes up. So I would say 50% of the time, I just get a payment that shows up and I go, I wonder who just paid me for what. Right.
That's awesome.
So like that's 50% of the time. It's like I just like inbox hunting, I call it. Like what is this one from? And so, obviously that's a good problem to have. And at that point, we just transition to onboarding. So I'll immediately like have the team send out a text. We have a process that we just immediately start executing on it. So for us, like they get some cookies and chocolates in the mail. So we immediately order that we send them a welcome letter, and then we start immediately like these are the passwords and things we need access to.
Love it.
So that's 50% of the time. That's the easy way. Now, I'd say the rest of the time you're met with, hey, I still got a question or two. And that is to me like navigating a text chat. But for the most part, it's not like most people think, because there is no selling, there is no convincing. Like almost always, I would say the questions are variations of like, well, here's my specific situation. Would it work? And sometimes it's because they have a little bit of a curveball, or sometimes they don't meet a certain criteria. It might be like I've had people, for example, like message me on our agency stuff as well, because I mentor people in the agency space. But I've had people come to me and say like, hey, I've been doing this 12 years and we're doing really well, but for different reasons, I decided to start over in a new niche. I'm at 0 and your stuff says, I don't help you go from 0 to 1, but I'm kind of a special case because I already did it 12 years. So I'm not like total newbie green behind the ears. And then it's like, what do you think of my situation? Would you take me? So you get some of that element where people say like, here's my situation. Would it work for me? And usually I just like, this is all handled over text or email. So I kind of just go with the flow. Sometimes I get text messages. Sometimes I get messenger messages. Sometimes I get emails. If they message me an email, we're discussing it in email. If we're discussing it in chat. And I'll tell you the cool thing is it allows me to quote unquote close deals when I'm just doing regular everyday shit. So like, like I was sitting by the pool and my oldest daughter is doing the screaming at me, Daddy, watch me jump into the pool. And, it's like, you're impressed the first time, like, holy crap, my 5-year-old just jumped in the pool. But the next 600 times, like, I got it. You know how to jump in the pool and hold your breath. Well, when she's running over, she doesn't know it, but daddy pulls out his phone for a second and like, I'm quote unquote closing a deal. And then she gets out. Did you see that? Yes, I did. You were amazing. Right. And I can also close like quote unquote close several of these at the same time. That's one of the other things. Like I can have 6, 7 different conversations going with people in different chat windows kind of simultaneously. And it's usually just like being real with people. Like, I think this would work in your situation. I don't know. Or no, sorry, like that just doesn't sound like a good fit to me. Like I had a guy the other day who messaged me on some stuff and he had the kind of equivalent business in India. And I'm like, hey, I got nothing against people in India. I've hired like only 1 billion of you guys since I started, but I just don't think these methodologies work as well for somebody in India. So I'd like have to tell you no. And so that's really it. It's like 50% of the time payment hunting, 50%, or sometimes I'll just get messages from people. They just say, I'm in. I'm like, okay. And then I have to see what they're even looking at for what I'm in for. Yeah.
What are you in? Which funnel?
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
I'm in. What do we do next? That kind of thing.
Yeah, we have so many funnels at EF. I get hit up from PE people to e-commerce to affiliates. So now I have like a based on what they say to me, I kind of like what you're talking about with the legal people, right? Like I know affiliates are probably going to be talking about like SEO and like something with Amazon. FBA people are also going to be talking about like Amazon commission fees. They all have like their own little language. So now that like, oh, they must be in this funnel based on the
Yeah.
question that they're asking me, right? So that makes a lot of sense. I think that is super cool how you set that up. And I also like the touch of the chocolates. I don't think a lot of people give thought on like sending something to people once they sign up. Like in my opinion, the moment someone buys something from you is the moment they regret it. So you gotta like do something like, no, you did not make a bad decision. Like this is still a good decision. Yeah. For someone that is, just starting out and they're looking to grow an agency kind of in the Frankie Fihn fashion here, what is like your calculus on tasks that take up too much time that you shouldn't be doing versus tasks that are worth the time that they take? Because obviously, not everything is automated in the business, right? And sometimes it does make sense to spend a lot of time on a certain thing. So, like, how do you kind of go about this as you manage your time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really intelligent, loaded question. I think it depends on kind of what stage you're at in the journey. So, like when you're starting out and you're solo and it's just you, and the business is a one person and you're the janitor and the CEO and you wear all the hats and you change the garbage. It doesn't really matter whether you're doing this in e commerce or flipping businesses, real estate, options trading, agency, doesn't matter. Your only job right then and there is like to make sales, and the only way you can make sales is like proactively put your stuff in front of the people who buy it and like make offers to them. I know people dress that up, and I'll tell you what wastes most people's time in those kind of stages is they do a lot of things that feel like what I are getting ready that are not actually things that matter. So you'll see this like people like update their website logo for the
Yep.
12,000th time
Yep.
for a website that has 3 visitors, 2 of which are your mom and your aunt, right? So like it doesn't really matter. You got to proactively like if I'm selling to lawyers, I have to go get in front of lawyers. Like it's not if I'm selling, I don't know, baby products on e-commerce, like if I don't get in front of parents that got babies, and buy those kind of things, like nothing's going to change, right? So you have to like in that stage just be very ruthless and proactive about getting in front of the people's. And then what will inevitably happen is you will outgrow that stage and your problems will all shift to some form of fulfillment and actually delivering on the things you do. And obviously it looks different. If you're doing e-commerce, you're probably like trying to figure out shipment and scale and communication, things like that. And if you're doing an agency, it's actually running campaigns and building backlinks and things like that. But eventually you reach a stage where getting in good people who can help you becomes the new bottleneck, becomes the new, like, if we don't have good people to help us execute on this, like, I'm never going to be able to, like, remove myself enough to be able to grow it to the next level. When you get a
Yeah.
level past that, you become like a manager. And a manager's, you'll know you're at the manager stage when essentially you don't do any of the day-to-day stuff, but you're still involved every day. So you're not pushing any of the buttons, you're not moving any of the stuff, but people are asking you questions and you're kind of supporting your team. And what happens is almost always, like, you reach that stage, people come at you with a what I call, hey, do you got a minute? You got a minute? You got a minute for this? You got a minute for that? I need a and all day long. What will happen is if you don't get proactive about what to manage, your whole day can just be interrupted and sidetracked with shit that, like, frankly doesn't matter. And so you have to become like really, really ruthless about these are the 5 to 8 things that move the needle in our business. measure them, track them, and make decisions based on, and they're usually just around sales and fulfillment. Like they're not super complicated metrics. Like this, how many leads we had, this, how many people are interested. This is where we're at on delivery times. This is, how we're making out with this issue and so forth. And so a lot of what wastes people's time in those stages is actually feels like productive work. Like in the first stage, like getting your website ready and getting all your materials ready feels like productive work, and it's not. When you're in the second stage, like hustling your ass off to fulfill on stuff feels like productive work, but it's really not as productive as bringing in people who can help you. And when you get to the manager stage, it feels like you're being productive because you're helping everybody solve their issues, but it's not. It's not productive until you start ruthlessly deciding these are the two things that are going to move the needle. Let's work on those two things. And everything else is secondary and can wait. There's obviously levels past that too, but I think probably like 98% of the people we just described in one of those three stages. And it's always interesting because when you get in the stage, you don't always recognize you're in it. You don't always recognize that the thing that got you to that point won't be the thing that carries you forward. Like in stage one, you can kind of outsell everything. In stage two, you can eventually figure out how to bring in good people. But then in stage three, like you realize you know nothing about managing something at scale, nothing at all. And like balls get dropped and all that. So it's probably different things at different times. But I'd say probably for the vast majority of people who are in the smaller stages, like quit fucking with your website and go put shit in front of people and face rejection, which is the reason why most people like avoid it. Cause like they might say no, but if you focus on making offers that are easy to say yes to and you do it to the right people, like there'll be a lot less no's than you think. And usually the no's aren't so super harsh. They're just usually like, no, thanks.
Yeah, they really aren't. And like you do like 20 or 30 of those kind of calls, like all the jitters go away. It doesn't matter anymore. Like you could say anything. I've had people like we have a cold email campaign I've been doing at EF, and they'll send me these like 5 paragraph essays of how much of a retard I am. Like they'll use those words and like much more, even more colorful words. Like, just doesn't affect you because like that email campaign is also generating like 18 million pipeline, like
Yeah.
you're going to get that. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I'm with you, man. Even at the high level, I've seen that. Like I've worked with a few people which are technically search funds, but in my industry, they were called aggregators, where they raise like hundreds of millions of dollars to buy FBA businesses, right? And you talk to these guys and like they're really good at spreadsheets, but really bad at actually operating the business. And they never figured out that part. So they've done like very similar mistakes. I see people like in your group and Jeff's group and other agency groups I've seen do as well. So it kind of plays out at all scales. So I have a potentially divisive question for you. I'm curious on what you think about this. So I always like snooping around in agency space because I find it fascinating, and hence I found you. But I see a lot of people, they'll joke about like, oh yeah, all these people, they're just like, they'll sell a local business owner or whatever, and then they don't know how to fulfill, so they go hire the white label person to fulfill, and they're like kind of like giving them a hard time. But then other people are like, no, that's exactly the way you should be doing it. To your point, so they can focus on closing more deals, right? So what are your thoughts on someone starting out as they're making that transition? Like they're getting the offers, they close a few deals, and maybe they don't know how to fulfill yet because they just had enough practice to really learn what to do. Like, what's your recommendation for them?
Usually, like I kind of compare this to a restaurant where a restaurant has a very clear front of house and back of house. Like if you've been to any restaurant, like have you ever worked in one? Like I did when in my kind of like, I don't know, high school years. It was like, it was Red Lobster, slinging some lobsters and shrimp in the background there. And I remember in the front of house, your only real job is to charm the guests and make sure they have a good experience and to tell them with enthusiasm why today's special is so extra delicious that they must try it. And everybody's familiar with those kind of front of house things. And then you have the back of house, and usually it's a bunch of guys in hair aprons and barely showered that day who just showed up waiting for their smoke break, slinging out lobsters. But they know how to cook it. They know how to cook the lobster to the right temperature and do it. And usually I find the vast majority of people fall in one of those two camps where you either like doing the front of house or you like doing the back of house. And even if as you do this a long time, and I'm assuming it's the same for you, Greg, like you'll understand the other side of the business. Like I'm a front of house guy. I like selling. I like presenting. I like talking about business. I hate fulfilling on stuff. I know how to do it. I just don't want to. And so I'm not a big believer that there's a one size fits all answer. But if you just are sincerely, honestly good at front of house, which I think probably describes 80 to 90% of the people listening to this because we're marketers. Like you like selling, you like psychology, you like creating ads and putting stuff out there and those kind of things, and doing businessy kind of things, chances are the thing that's going to really help you is a back of house person. And so to me, I'm all for a white label person that's competent and knows how to do your stuff. If the honest truth is you're just better at making promises than keeping them, you need that, right? Like, and that's just the honest truth. Like, I realized after 20 years that like it's way easier for me to create a promise that sells than to actually fulfill on it. And so I need good people who can actually like, do the things I'm out there extending myself. And full transparency, use some white label partners on different projects and things like that we're doing. Now, having said that, there was a period like 17, 18 years ago when I first got started. I actually just only knew one thing. I knew how to rank websites. And I didn't want to have to talk to people about selling it. Like, that intimidated me greatly. And so it wasn't always the case that I liked doing the front of house kind of things. In fact, I only knew back of house in those days. And I ended up getting a partner, and I was his white label partner, where he went out and sold plastic surgery websites. And a lot of those people said, can you do SEO? And he didn't. And so he would like represent me as an arm of his company and say, yes, we do. And I would be the fulfillment, actually cooking the lobster in the back of the house. And so, like, I think you just have to be real with how you're built and build your business around you. But I don't think it needs to be this divisive thing where it's like it's the right answer for everybody. Because the truth is, not everybody wants to be front of house. I've met plenty of people that I just got an email from a guy yesterday who said, I know how to create technology and solve problems. I know how to sell it too, but I don't want to sell it. Can you bring me somebody who can be the face of the brand and sell this thing so I can actually just create a really valuable software and tool for the people I'm trying to create it? And I don't have to focus on like, trying to figure out how to market and present it. He's like, I can do all those things. I just don't want to. So I think like the right kind of business is when you're just real with yourself about how you're built and then you optimize around it. I think it's really funny because like I'm so narrowed on those couple of things. Like, there's only like 5 things I know how to do. Everybody like in our space thinks I'm super awesome. It's hilarious around our house because I don't know how to fix anything. Like if my car, like there's like 3 things. Like I can change a tire, I can like top up some motor oil and some like other fluids, and I can connect the battery things. But if like anything happens, like I have to call people. If there's even a doorknob breaks at my house, I have to call somebody to fix the doorknob, right? And that to me is like a function of like I'm so 10x'd on my strengths, and I'm so just like, hey, I'm not going to ever be Mr. Fix It. I'm not going to ever try and be Mr. Fixer. I don't want to be. I ain't any good at it. I don't want to learn it. And we all have things like that. And so I just say like, instead of trying to build somebody else's business and taking this advice, just like be real with you about how you're built. And for me, like, and I'm sure it's the same for you, Greg, like I like making podcasts and shooting my mouth off and having cool conversations. And so like, I never reach a point where I'm at capacity with that. It's all the fulfilling on it that drives me crazy. It's actually having to cook the orders. And so, but that's not true of everybody is the reason I say that. It's like, just, build it around you and how you're built.
I think that is fantastic advice. You made me think of several stories, but there was a funny one. You and I were talking offline about how we both used to work in the oil field for a little bit, which I didn't know about you, which is cool. But I remember I was on the job, I think for like 3 or 4 months, fixing pumps for solids control. And at this point, I should know how to fix a centrifugal pump. I had no idea as to. I'm like the worst mechanic in the world. And my boss told me and my buddy, like, all right, you two, you go fix that pump that broke. And so I look at my buddy Jared, like, dude, how long is this going to take us? Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And he's like, well, that depends, Greg. It could either take us all day or it could take 5 minutes. It depends on how funny you are. So that was like the reason I never got fired on the crew. Other people were like way better than me, but they were assholes to work with. And I was like the good morale of the crew, which is important when you're like in the far north, right? To keep everyone sane. So I always joke I'm the bard, like in a D&D party. Like that's my thing. Like similar to you, I enjoy having good conversations, all that kind of stuff. So in terms of like people, so let's say a person takes the white label route because they want to be the front of house, like you were talking about. They're building their back of the house. As they expand, is it in their best interest to eventually bring that back of the house, that white label partner, like start hiring it internally? Or do you think there is a hybrid model, or just stick with the white label as your agency is scaling up? What would you recommend?
Yeah, again, it's like, who are you and what do you want? So like the longer I do this, the more like I'm just the lifestyle agency guy. Like I've built the big, like sellable machine kind of agency more than once. And truth be told, I hated it. I really did, right? And it wasn't necessarily like there's anything bad with it. It's just like I was doing it to get to an end. And the more I do this, the more I'm just optimized for like life first, business fits around that. And so for me, like I do the vast majority of stuff when my kids are asleep. I have kind of like set days. And so it makes sense to just have a white label partner and keep them forever and not to try and bring that in-house. But my goals are like, just very clear so I can hang out with my kids at the beach. My goals are not because I'm trying to, have an 8-figure exit or something like that. So if I was trying to like maximize sellable value, although you can still sell on a white label, I might have a very different goal. But I think it's just being real with it about what you want. I realize after like 20 years of doing this, I think the vast majority of people don't actually want the big business as much as they think. They just want a business that like, for me, like means like, and I'm sure it's the same for you, like I don't have to look at the prices when I go buy shit. Right? Like, how much? When I go to a restaurant, I don't like. I used to read right to left, like price $15. Okay, I can get that one, right? And a lot of it now is just like I just do what I want when I want, and the business works in the greater context of that. And so it's a lot of fun doing cool stuff with cool people. And I don't really have like some long-term goal other than just to enjoy the process as it goes. I think if more people stuck with that, they would actually build better business. And I'll tell you, I've had some really interesting experiences on that. I remember one, I was hanging at this big Hollywood party. So I got invited to this like, I don't know, like A-list, raise money for charity kind of thing. I had some friends who were putting on the event and they said, we want you to come. And so I got to meet like Ashton Kutcher was there, Jack Canfield, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy. There were lots of A-listers. I met Jay Abraham in person for the first time there. And they're just like some like real movers and shakers in the space. There were lots of athletes and stuff. I don't even watch TV enough to know who half the people were, but they're on the TV. And there was a dude in there. And I remember we had like a 3-hour conversation. And he said to me, I said, how's your day going? And he said, well, I have $300 million in my bank account that I didn't have yesterday. And I said, really? I said, how did you get to that point? And he told me that he had created this app and he had invested like 12, 13 years of his life into building it. And it finally sold and it had closed, but like paperwork money, like the money is now in his account today, 300 million. And immediately, obviously, that was like a really intriguing story as an entrepreneur. Like this dude just made 300 million. Tell me everything that you know. And by the end of the story, I didn't want to change places with him. He told me that he became an alcoholic and his own family no longer recognized him. He's like, he had 2 daughters. And he said, if I passed them on the street, they wouldn't even know I was their dad. He said, everyone I know and care about hates me. But I made $300 million selling an app. And when I really looked at that, I was like, that's not success to me. Like originally when he opened his mouth, like that was success 101. But by the time we finished the conversation, I was like, that's not success. And so, it made me really think about like what really matters in this. And I'm not opposed to any of you guys going out there and making $300 million exits, just so you guys know, but not at the expense of everything else that actually matters. Yeah. And so to me, how I've kind of like defined that as I go is to like make the $300 million exit fit into the just doing the day-to-day stuff that I like doing and would do anyway. And the ultimate test for me is when you're in line with like, should I be front of house, back of house, white label, not white label, where do I take it? Is if you think a lot of days, maybe not every day, all the time, but if a lot of the time you think, I can't believe I get paid for this shit, then you're usually in the right kind of lane. If you're thinking, oh, this feels like pushing a boulder uphill and it's effort and effort and effort, and eventually it's going to be worth it because I'm going to make a bazillion, gajillion dollars. And you may, I've built that kind of business too, and it's not all it's cracked up to be. And so the way I look at it now is the more you can optimize the process to like kind of automatically create the outcomes that you want, the better you're going to do. So for me, it's less about like even trying to get anywhere or do anything or stay in one lane. And it's more just like I said, it's like really, really just own who you are and how you like doing things and then ruthlessly build around that. And then I think that's when you reach the space where it actually kind of becomes easy. I wouldn't say business is ever easy, but it definitely like gets levels easier because like people have asked me, like I put out a lot of content in the agency space and I wrote a book and stuff. I've had people like, how do you put out so much content? And I'm like, I can't shut up about this stuff. Right? What do you mean put out content? Right? It's not work for me. I don't wake up and go, I got to make content. It's just how I'm built. And so I think the more you're like, I can't stress that enough because people, it's extra confusing because if you listen to 25 different gurus, they'll all tell you got to use this system, often with a stake in that financial system. Like you got to be doing it this way. And this, like, you got to be running over the top promises. That's how it works. You got to be.
Where's your school community? Why are you not making a school community?
You got to send 10,000 Instagram DMs a day or you're a fucking loser. and all of that. And like, I'm all for any of those things if that's how you're actually built. But if you're just sending 10,000 Instagram messages to try and get to some end, don't be surprised when you sell the $300 million app and have given up everything that really matters along the way. And so, like,
Oh yeah.
I was at a conference once, and the headline speaker was Joe Montana, the 49ers quarterback, who, like, was Tom Brady before Tom Brady. Like, and he was talking about, somebody asked him, like, how did you prepare for the pressure of the Super Bowl? And his answer, I'll never forget. He said, I'm a big believer that the way you do one thing is the way you do anything. He said, so in my mind, every single time we practiced for 10 years, I was practicing the Super Bowl in my head. I imagined the lights, the cameras, the pressure, the moment, the TV cameras, the sports writers, the stupid commercials. And I imagined me winning it. And I practiced like I was going to win the Super Bowl. By the time the Super Bowl came, like, I had already done this in my mind so many times, it was second nature. It was like, of course we're going to win the Super Bowl. What do you think I've been getting ready for all these years? And so he said, the way you do one thing is the way you do anything. And I'm a believer that if you only seek in your business, like if you optimize only for the money and then are willing to like sacrifice all the short-term things you don't want to be doing, especially in the greater context, I'm not saying you're going to love everything you're doing all the time, but like as a whole, you're mostly doing stuff you don't want to be doing just to get to an outcome. Don't be surprised if you build a business you hate. Ask me how I know that. And when you optimize around just who you are and how you're built, like, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's the closest thing I found to business being easy.
I 100% agree with you, man. On the content stuff, like, I have this podcast, I have the YouTube channel. Sometimes I'm writing blog posts or emails in a content style, right? But even so, like, and with all my other projects going on, I keep daydreaming about creating this like YouTube channel on the psychology of marketing. Not so much like talking head videos like most people do. Because I write poetry, as you would know, because you're now my friend on Facebook. So I was thinking it would be so much fun to do, like, combine my passion of like dark poetry, a Black Mirror, and marketing education. It'd just
There
be
you
like,
go, right?
there's no point of like, I don't care if it would make money. I just think it'd be really fun to do. To your point about like creating content about stuff you like I love talking about M&A. I talk about this stuff all the time. So I'm right with you. And I too have met individuals like what you're talking about. I knew a guy, his company at one point was worth over $1 billion. And I met him. We were hanging out in Dubai. This is my first time meeting the guy. He had bought a lot of businesses from me. And he told me he was managing at one point 400 people. And like a lot of them were his directs. He barely had anything in between him and them. And he eventually just kind of mentally lost it where, he went down to like 10 people. Eventually he got kicked out of his own company. It was not fantastic. He did make it out good in the end, though, similar to the $300 million guy. I don't think his life was as destroyed as the guy you just mentioned, but similar parallels there. So
Yeah.
I agree with everything you just said there. No matter how big you want to go, you should build it around who you are. Speaking of that, I know we're running out of time, but I do have another question on this. So when someone is like trying to build out that business as they're growing, whether they want to scale into, the moon, or they want to build a lifestyle business like what you're talking about, how do they grow without spending more time on it? And what I mean by that is like, how do they keep getting to that next level where they want to grow when as they're growing, they're not getting caught down into the weeds, like that manager solving all the different problems that they think, they need to solve when really they probably shouldn't be focusing on that. What's your strategy there?
Yeah, that's such a deep question. And I'm going to share kind of a little bit of insight that's been useful for us on that. I'm actually writing a second book right now. It's probably about 80% finished on this kind of idea.
Ah,
And it's for the old internet marketers who want to create the old passive automated recurring income, which is something that I daydreamed about 8, 9 years ago, had zero of it. And slowly but surely I've begun to add it over time where there's money that comes in repetitiously in the inbox. I call it inbox money that doesn't require us to do anything, and it's predictable, and almost like it was everything I liked about a job. The only thing I liked about a job is just knowing you're going to get paid on Friday. It has the knowing you're going to get paid on Friday without the deliverable and having to go there 40 hours a week. It's the do once, get paid again and again. In there, I lay out something that Robert Kiyosaki talked about years ago that just made a ton of sense to me, but I didn't know how to apply digitally. And the idea was that, rather than throwing stones at anyone else, I'll share my own experience. I've been poor, middle class, and rich. So I feel like I've embodied all three at different points in my life. When I was broke, I was just trying to get paid just enough to get by, just cover my basic bills so I could get drunk on the weekends. Like that was my life goal. It's like, if we can get drunk on the weekends. Middle class me was like, I want a good job. I want, a salary. I want some benefits, and had house and car kind of aspirations. Wealthy me thinks about it as like a deal maker slash I'm looking to own and control assets. Now, the fundamental difference in like how you earn at those levels. So usually like as poor me was just like whatever paycheck I could make that was like the most amount of money that I could get without having to work too hard and just get my basic needs met. That was good enough for me. Right. Like I said, I'm just trying to survive to the week and get drunk. That was the goal. Middle class me was like more selective about which kind of job, but it was the same kind of scenario of trading time for money. And there's a point where you divorce it where you own assets. Now, this really made sense when Robert Kiyosaki explained it. And he used lots of real world examples. The guy who owns, and I had a real life guy that I knew kind of like, no, I wouldn't say super well, but like, like we hung out and we're on a first name basis. His name was Franco, this old Italian guy. And he was the richest guy I knew back home. And he owned 7 apartment buildings and a golf course. And he just hung out at his golf course and like, schmoozed with people at the country club and ate some good food. And that was basically his life. And the reason why he was rich is because he owned 7 apartment buildings and a golf course. And his wealth didn't come from any sort of trading time for money. It came from what he owned. And that's really, really obvious that if you own businesses or you own stocks or you own like valuable crypto or you own gold or whatever, like wealth is ultimately derived from what you own and control. The problem is I went into this digital world and had no way of seeing how to apply any of that because I was like, well, I don't deal with apartment buildings. I'm just a guy who writes shit on the internet and tries to sell stuff.
Posting on Facebook.
And what I ultimately came to realize is all the same things were true digitally. It just like nobody sees it. And so I started like over the years kind of mentally cataloging assets. And there's a fundamental shift that you make. And I didn't realize this, but I believe the vast majority of people, including me, so I'm not throwing stones at anybody, including me, I ran my agency with middle class values in disguise for a lot of years. It was like, we had 150 clients that paid us between $800 and $1,200 a month. And so I look at like, I collect a set amount per month of money per month, just like a salary times X number of bosses. And and the thing about it is I had no real control or ownership. When somebody left, it's not like I owned a share of their company or owned a share of what we had increased. Like I was just really working for a salary in disguise. And what I ultimately realized is that when you own and control digital assets and are essentially renting them out the same way somebody would rent an apartment building, it's a very different game. And it even shows up the way differently. Like if you guys, for those of you guys who are with me on the service provider journey, it even shows up differently in the way you present the exact same thing to clients. Because originally I thought I was like an expert being hired for a service because I knew how to solve specific problems. And so as a service provider, you're kind of like for hire, like a middle class. You're trying to get hired. Even the language you use around it is like, how do I get clients to hire me? How do I get hired by clients kind of thing. When you own tools and systems, it looks more like this. You're making the value, the tool and the system, the thing you own. And so it looks more like, hey, we've got a system that's getting motorcycle case leads at $10 a piece at scale. We can get anywhere from like a couple dozen of them to like thousands per month, depending on how much you want to spend. I've already got it set up where we've got 2 years worth of nurture for it. We have a book we license out to you. And as soon as you start running this, within 60 to 90 days, you'll start having inquiries for people who say, I want to hire you for my big motorcycle case. And you'll 8x typically what you would normally spend on the ad spend with these kind of campaigns. Would you be interested in having this campaign employed in your business? And the value in that scenario is not me. It's not my expertise. It's actually like literally the tools and systems and processes I own and control. And those to me are like digital apartment buildings that I'm renting out over and over and over and over. And so the idea is like, how do you divorce time from money? Is like you stop selling you as the deliverable and you start selling your tools and systems and your intellectual property and the things you own. And then you become like what I call like an IP pimp. And you start to realize that you can be leasing like digital versions of you. I always say like, I want the hardest working person in my company to be digital me. Right? Part of the reason, like there's a hidden metric that applies to any business that will determine how much money you make. And it's really offers made, both how many and how big and how relevant the offers you make. But like I see like, cause I'm doing stuff with YouTube creators right now, helping them to monetize their audiences. And almost always the people who like don't make anything from their audience don't make any offers. It's like, it's really obvious in my mind. You never offer anything, they don't buy anything. Amazing how that goes together, right? And the flip side of that, I know some friends that are probably like, even like total psychopaths with how many offers they just DM people, but they sell a lot of stuff. People just make a lot of
Yeah.
offers, right? And so what I found is when making offers was up to me, when it was up to Frankie and when he felt good and when people would talk to him, I made a lot less offers than when I started putting it in digital. And digital me is just making offers 24/7, 365 days a year. So the divorcing time from money thing only happens when you start to like want to be paid for tools and systems and processes and things that you own, and not from I'm going to trade me as the deliverable. It took me a lot of years to really understand this, that even in a service business where you think the value is you, it's actually more valuable for the client. So I'll give you an example of a guy I helped with this. He was selling websites and he did it for cleaning companies. And what he did is he would put this chat widget on their site. And what would happen is, like, a lot of times they would get calls from people say, can you tell me how much it is for this? How much for this room? How much for that? And a lot of times those people just hang up. And so the business owner, the cleaning company experiences it as like tire kickers. And so he said, why don't we just put a chat widget on your website? It'll answer 80 to 90% of the pricing questions. If they still want to call you and find out the rest. And what happened is the cleaning companies, when they would install that, they get less overall phone calls. But the phone calls that show up were like, hey, I'm interested in your $1,200 office decleaning. Can I get one of those once a month? And so they liked it because like the people were more pre-sold, less overall calls, but more quantity. Now, what most people do in that situation is a middle class thing. So he asked me a middle class question, which I've been in that same middle class thing is, how do I get hired for more websites? How do I get more web design clients? And that's a middle class question. How do I get hired? How do I get people to pay me as if it's their permission? When you make the jump to like wealthy digital asset owner, you realize I own a process that helps weed the tire kickers. And that's worth money to cleaning companies. So rather than saying, will you hire me for a website? Now I'm saying, can I install my chat widget on your website, eliminate most of the tire kickers for you, and get people pre-sold in your stuff. In fact, I'm so confident in it, I'll install it for you for free on your website for 2 months. And if you don't find that it at least eliminates some of those tire kickers, I'll go back and remove it off your website. But if you do find you like it, I'm happy to lease it to you for $199 a month, and you can keep it for as long as you want it, no contracts or whatever. And all of a sudden, the value is the asset. And here's the thing that like really blew my mind is like, that's actually better for the clients because it's like, it's more consistent. It's the tool that's the value, right? It's not the me personally. And so ultimately the switch is like, how do you get your time back in that process is like rent stuff you own or control and not always be giving you away. And so I started to realize like for like one of the things we've added into our agencies thing that I resisted for a lot of years is I have a bunch of courses. People ask me for years, like, when are you going to make a course on this? And I'm not really a course buyer, to be honest with you. So I resisted. I'm like, man, I hate 47 modules. I never make it through them. Like, I'm just not a course buyer. And I had somebody say, like, instead of thinking about it as a course, why don't you lease something you have that's working? So like, for example, I have a course that's about opening with strangers to be able to get them to be interested in buying your stuff, which we've done for years and years and years. And all I'm really doing is I'm leasing a script and there's just enough training and swipe file around that so that you can go do it and go execute it and you understand how to use it. But I'm not like, you're not getting 47 modules of whatever. You're leasing my tool that works for us. And that's the difference is now you're paying me to have access to the tool. So it's a deep philosophical thing. I'm going into it in book 2, but it's ultimately like, are you paid for you and your brain and your ability to solve problems? Or are you paid for the tools and apartment buildings you already own? And when you make that switch, it wouldn't even make sense for people to ask you. They would say, I need to jump on a meeting about your chat widget. Why? It's installed. It works, right? Like, it just wouldn't even make sense. And so, and this is especially easy to fall into for our kind of online businesses because so many of our assets, they're kind of hidden. Like an apartment building is really obvious. You drive by the street and you go, hey, nobody's maintaining that building. It's worth money. But you don't always see that like the website I made is worth money. The course I made is worth money. The ad I figured out how to run is worth money. And even if you just create it, almost, in fact, usually you create it first for personal use and it benefits other people. I used to see this a lot in the legal space where I used to think they were all copycats of each other because I would meet one guy who's like, I'm the heavy hitter. And then I'd go one state over and he's like, I'm the heavy hitter. And I go one state over, I'm the heavy. I'm like, are these guys so unoriginal? What I found is one guy would figure out something that worked for him and then he would license his tools. He would say, hey, this video, this gimmick works for me. If you want to lease my intellectual property, you can, and you can run it in your state. And you just have to pay like an access fee. What blew my mind is they would actually make more money doing almost nothing. Renting their IP is actually running a law firm. And so almost always, if you've ran a business for more than a year, you have IP and intellectual property and assets. You probably just are keeping them just to yourself. And if you decide to like create more value by giving those tools to more people and renting access to them, you're going to find that there's no time trade-off in that process.
That's fantastic, man. I 100% agree with that. It's kind of like a good old Hermosi man, his whole gym launch or whatever his business, gym launch, I think was the name of it. It's basically just an IP play, similar to what you're
Yeah.
saying, like processes, all that kind of stuff, dressed up like really, really nicely. So people spend
Yeah.
a ton of money on it, right? But I agree. Like when I talk to entrepreneurs, they ask me, how do I make my business more valuable? The question I always return with them is like, well, let me ask you this: how worthless are you to your own business? And that always catches them off guard. It's a little tongue in cheek. What? No, I'm like the linchpin. I'm everything. I do this and this. I'm not worthless at all to my business. Like, well, your business is way less valuable then. Like your
Yeah.
goal should to become useless to the business, because the more useless you are, the more valuable that business is, and
Yeah.
more buyers are going to spend big, big money to buy you, because that's what they
Yeah.
want. They want an investment that's divorced from that time, kind of what you're saying there. So I really like that whole mentality. I joke with the four horsemen of wealth is coding. Like, I think coding is the worst skill, especially now out of the four. It's coding, sales, marketing is the second best skill. But the real valuable skill in business, in my view, is delegation, right? Whether you're delegating through automation or through actual people, I think that is the ultimate skill there. But yeah, Frank, so before I get into rapid fire questions, I do have one final question for you. So feel free to take your time on it. You've had a lot of mentors yourself, a lot of lessons learned across the years. So what has been the best piece of business advice you've ever received, and why was it so?
Yeah, it's funny. So the reason I'm writing the second book is because I had a mentor in South Carolina, and he's a big guy in the legal space. So he built multiple successful law firms. He said the first one built to like multiple seven figures. He said it almost bankrupted him and cost him his marriage. Second one, but I got to hang out with him. This is a guy who owned a successful coaching business. He owned a successful law firm. He invested in all kinds of other businesses. He even owned a strip club. And when we got to hang out in person, I literally never saw the dude work. Like barely. Like he would come up with an idea, he'd write it on a notepad, he'd text the team, then we go right back to golfing. And I was like, young, hungry entrepreneur, like, okay, Ken, like, when are we going to do the work part? Oh, I already, when I send a text, I sent it to my manager. She's already building that thing. We'll go check in on Friday. And it was hilarious because sometimes he would go to the country club and he'd fax it, and he always would fax it to his office upside down because he didn't know how to use the fax machine. He was old, and I was like, this is unreal. This guy's doing like, you know, $30 million. He's like, doesn't even know how to use a fax machine, and he never works, right? He like never works. He's like golfing and like, okay, we're gonna go to this restaurant. Okay, do you like karaoke? We're gonna go to, and like, just Ken, like, this is unreal. We're gonna go play some poker. I got us booking at and like he took me to like crazy exotic places. I remember like we were in Atlanta, and what are you doing right now? You hungry? Yeah, okay. Okay, I got us reservations. We go to the Peachtree Tower, which is the tallest building there. If you could take the elevator all the way to the top, there's a revolving restaurant. You can feel like a castle looking down across the entire city. You got to book it like months in advance. Like Ken's taking us there. When is this guy going to work? Right? That's the $1 million question. And he was neurotic about systems and processes and delegation. So he was getting things done, but just not in the way that I imagined it. And he said to me something that like forever would change my life. And I had no answer for it. And I said, like, I don't even remember how it came up, but he just said, well, buddy, basically I like to do things I can do once and get paid for again and again. And when he said it, it was like so like profoundly simple, but I realized I had a lot of income, but it was all active. Like if I took my foot off the gas, none of it would recur or compound or continue for very long. And so I was like, man, all my income is do once, get paid once. And then it was like, how do you do once? And he just gave me like 20 different things he was doing that were all like do once, get paid again and again. And that little shift for me has been like life changing in terms of return on time to income generated, because everything I do is do once, get paid again and again. Like even the whole point of like us recording this podcast is so that it can be recorded in the system. Whether 10 people listen to it, 1,000 people, you and I don't have to sit there delivering it. It's like can be delivered again and again without our continuous input. And so I don't know, that statement alone, like it perplexed me for like a year or two because I didn't even know how to implement that. I was just like, holy crap, that's life changing. But once I saw the power of it and I realized you can do things, set them up once so that you create continuous revenue streams, to me, it eliminates like everything that made entrepreneurship miserable for me in the early days, which is all this uncertainty of not knowing when the next time you were going to get paid and being stressed out about all money. Even like, I'd have a $30,000 day and then wonder how long is this going to have to last me? Do I have to pay my staff for this and all that? And it was always crazy. And now, like, I'm not saying that 100%, but almost every day is a payday now. Like there's some kind of do once, get paid thing that comes in and they get paid twice. And so it's like, I don't know, it's just chilled entrepreneurship for me out. And when he said that, I was mind blown. I was like, it's like, do once, get paid again. It's that easy? Yeah. I'm not saying it's that easy to be done, but it is that simple. It is really that simple.
I love it. Yeah, I 100% agree with that advice. I used to sell furniture for a living at Lazy Boy back up in Alaska, and I remember I was never the top guy, but I almost made as much money as the top guy. I was usually the bottom guy, but I still made almost as much money because I was the best at selling the warranty. That was like my secret. Like didn't move much furniture, but I moved a lot of warranties. But I remember I made 7 grand over Labor Day weekend. I was 21, not even 21. I was 20, and I made 7 grand in 2 days, and this is the most amount of money I've ever made in such a short period of time. I was like, man, I am amazing at sales. And this is 100% commission, right? My next paycheck, because I was like on my high rocker, right? I got my next paycheck, 50 cents. Like, oh, damn. So I learned that lesson quick. Like, oh, God, I need to do something to get this next paycheck. I've already spent the 7 grand. So, yeah, I'm with that mentor. I think building systems is the best thing. Like, as an entrepreneur, is an asymmetrical bet, right? You start a business, it's very fragile. It's like, hair on fire, but as long as you focus on systems and operations, that asymmetrical bet leads to people who are making crazy amount of money just living on a golf course, taking a young Frankie out for dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I'm with you on that, man. All right, well, we're at the end of the podcast, so I have 3 rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready? All
Let's do
right.
it.
So, in your opinion, what is the best hidden growth opportunities right now for digital marketing agencies?
Distribution, in a word. And what I mean by that is I believe that there's a bazillion people who've built audiences and have no idea what to do with them. And I think like coming in as a partner, because it's really this simple, is like help people who've already built audiences to make offers. Like sometimes it's like adding one sentence into what they're doing. Hey, if you like this, you might also like that. And this is what Disney's been doing for like 100 years. But I believe like doing that digitally because it's so easy. We're not in the day and age when people have to get TV like executives to buy into their show and all that. Like you just grab a phone and you're a content creator. And so there's people building audiences all day, every day that literally have no idea how to monetize them. Somebody was just telling me they had a video that like got like 2.5 million views on TikTok and they didn't make a penny from it. Because like that's a common thing. It's like they're better at building attention than knowing how to monetize attention. It's really just offers made. It's really that simple.
That's great advice. And yes, I see a lot of my friend, actually, my old oil field buddy of mine, is exactly like that. He has, I think, close to 1 million subscribers on YouTube. It's all YouTube shorts, and there's no real monetization other than like brand deals. So yeah, I've been trying to teach them some marketing stuff on the back end. All right, what tools or resources would you recommend for people to help them grow their agency or make it more passive?
Can I shamelessly plug a book in there since I kind of wrote one on that topic?
I am so glad that you decided to do that. This is the question I always build in for my guests to shamelessly promote themselves, and they're too shy to do it. So yes, please do so.
So it's funny. I wrote the book. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Beyond the Agency Box, and I'll have a second book on Amazon not too long from now. But the idea is like, I don't know, I just built 3 different agencies up, scaled them in over like almost 20 years, and honestly had no idea what I was doing for the vast majority of that. And looking back, I could see the lessons in the rear view mirror, but in the front view mirror, it just all felt hard and difficult and uphill. So my goal in writing the book was to put everything I know into a book so that you guys don't have to make all the same mistakes. All of it too. Like I lay it out there, the stages you go through, the how to make the offers, where to get the clients, hiring, onboarding, trading, expectations. Like it's basically everything you need to know to be what I think at least a upper 1% kind of pro at this business. And I wish this kind of stuff was available to me 20 years ago. That's my selfish motivation because it would have like saved me like 10 years of just getting brutal, difficult lessons that I didn't need to have.
I've read your book, so anyone who wants to go buy it has my approval. I enjoyed the book a lot. Very well written. I enjoyed it a lot. All right, man. So final question, the hardest question. Since you got into this whole digital marketing game, what has been your funniest moment?
My what, sorry, moment?
Your funniest moment.
Oh, I wrote about it in the book, but like one of my all-time favorites. I mean, I've had lots, so like I can't say like there's just one, but like I don't know, just what came to mind. I had a bunch of VAs, and I would track all their time using a screen recording software called Time Doctor. So on their end, there's like a tool. You click Start Work, and it doesn't like monitor everything you're doing and like record your whole 8-hour shift, but every like 10, 15 minutes it takes a screenshot of what you're doing and uploads it and monitors the website. Then when you're finished with the work, you just click Done and you close it, and it lets you know you're done. And I had this employee who came to me like privately. His name was Raphael, and he said to me like, "My mom's dying of cancer. I'm willing to work extra hard. I need this medicine for her, and like working for you is my way to do it. So I'm going to like bust my nuts." Well, he submits his end of shift report. I barely even like I was so busy scaling, I didn't even like really look at what my employees were doing at the time, and there was like nothing on there. So I was like, "Hey, he didn't really do anything all that much that day." So I fired up the software to see what he was doing, and he had literally spent an entire 8-hour shift just watching cartoon porn. So I remember seeing like a chick get railed by an octopus. That was the funniest thing. It was like Japanese stuff, so it was all blurred out. I was like, "This is what you're doing on company." I don't care if you do that on your own. Like, just don't click the button. I'm logging into work time. So anybody else, I would have fired them like on the spot. Like, hey, like cartoon porn is kind of like a deal breaker on company time.
This is
But
the
because
wrong genre.
I was feeling super guilty over the like, hey, my mom's dying of cancer, and I was like, like this like one and only warning, buddy. Literally submits a shift report the next day. There's nothing on it. I log on, more cartoon porn the next day. So, and he also he was playing like some game, but there was no like actual work time. So, I laugh, but those are actually my failings as a hiring manager, which we all kind of go through. But I don't know. It's still funny that like, it's like, dude, you're watching cartoon porn. I can tell you which cartoon porn you're watching.
That is awesome. What a legend that doing it twice in a row.
Yeah, because the second time he knew he was being watched,
Good for him.
right? Like he still wanted me to watch.
That was like part of it. That's awesome. Well, Frankie, I really enjoyed this podcast, man. I think you have a lot of great wisdom. If anyone wants to go pick your brain, read your book, or just ask you a question, where should they go to find you?
Well, I would say Amazon's the best place. Like as Greg mentioned, I got a book called Beyond the Agency Box. And for those of you guys, I'd say honestly, anybody's growing a service business in general, it's the playbook for growing a service business. Even though it's written for agencies by agencies, like it would be just as true if you're growing a law firm as if it was, you're growing any of those kind of businesses and the stages you go through. Also, we have a Facebook community called Beyond Agency Profits, Agency Lifestyle Design. So you guys can look us up if you guys are part of that. It's a free community where it's the ramblings of a guy who's been doing this 20 years and has figured out a few things, but is still learning to play this game of life.
Well, thanks, man. We'll put all those links in the show notes down below, and thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you, my dude.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you inspired at all the different things that are happening in this industry. And of course, if you just want to buy a highly profitable business, you can always go to empireflippers.com/marketplace. Or maybe you want to make an exit of your highly profitable business, and you could go to empireflippers.com/sell your site. I've been your host, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review, give us a like, a follow, share it across social media. Talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode.